There's a reason we talk about moved to sadness, moved to laughter. I mean, it's an emotion moving through you. And yeah, the release of tears. I mean, it is movement. It's movement.
You know what that we should coin? Crying is the tear ducts twerking.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
I'm not crying. My tear ducts are twerking.
I love it.
Damn, let's talk some shit.
It's Polly Siegel
And Victoria Aaron.
two licensed therapists who've spent way too much money on degrees, certifications, and trainings. We both love what we do and couldn't imagine working in any other profession. But we're forced to be serious all the time, and that gets boring. Shit Talking Shrinks discusses important mental health topics, the human experience, and society at large, while poking fun along the way. It won't be all fun and games because after every episode, you'll walk away with tangible tools to navigate life more effectively.
We love a tangible tool.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Oh, did you like how we just naturally moved our body while we
I know.
said, and we get to talk with Erica today? We have a fabulous guest. Erica Hornthal does incredible work clinically around the mind-body connection and movement and how transformative that is for mental health and just our general wellness. And Erica, we're really happy to have you.
So happy.
Truly.
Yeah, like how we're already moving.
Everybody's moving.
Yes.
Yeah. It's good. Feels good.
Moving and grooving.
Erica, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Erica Hornthal, sometimes known as the therapist who moves you on social media. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. I practice just outside of Chicago, Illinois, and I'm a board certified dance movement therapist. So that's really the expertise that we're going to be bringing in today is that movement, dance, for mental health piece. I've been in private practice for about 12 years and practicing overall for almost 15. So
wait, I had no idea you were in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm just outside of Chicago in Deerfield. So it's like,
Oh, I live in Glencoe.
do you seriously?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm in Glencoe all the time because my office is in Northfield.
Hi.
All right. We're like, stop the recording. No, that's crazy. I had no idea. So we'll have to meet in person someday.
I would love it. And this is what we call Beshert.
For everyone that doesn't know, Erica Hornthal with a last name like that is Jewish.
I mean, I married into it, but my maiden name, Stockman, German, I don't know. People people are always like, you're Jewish? What?
Those are opposite ends of the spectrum for sure.
But yeah, Hornthal, I can get away with it a little bit more. So it sounds a little more authentic.
Yeah. Victoria and I had a debate the other day. I promise to all of our listeners, we're going to get into the juiciness of movement in just a moment, but I need to tell this story. So Victoria and I went on a fabulous trip together, one of our best trips. And I was trying to explain to her that she has very Jewy mannerisms. And she's like, what? No, I don't. And I'm like, you do though. So by the end of this, I want you to tell us, Erica, who you think, which one of us has the more Jewy mannerisms by the end of this recording?
Oh my God.
Since you're a movement specialist,
Yes, but I'm trained not to have any cultural bias. So.
Oh shit. I got a lot of that.
I think we all do. But all right, I'll keep an eye and ear out.
Yes, thank you.
So tell us about your passion, Erica. Like, how did you get into writing your book, but also just emphasizing this important mind-body connection and movement?
I really don't think it was until I was already in school getting my master's in dance movement therapy that I really understood. And actually, like once I was in private practice, where kind of my perspective really shifted to what I do and how I practice today. But early on, I think I felt and knew that dance was a way back to my most, I guess how we say it today, authentic self. Sometimes it was an escape. Sometimes it was to put on a persona. Sometimes it was for performance, but it just felt good. Like anything that was going on in my life, I could bring it into the dance studio and move through it. I don't think I quite realized that as I was growing up, but as I started out my book, I realized, the constant in my life was continuing to dance, was continuing to show up. And I feel so strongly and passionately about how we have to challenge the way our body shows up in challenges and struggles. Otherwise, it will continue to perpetuate the mental health concerns or challenges that we're experiencing. So, for me, going through life, having a lot of transitions, I moved around a lot. I did experience a lot of anxiety as a child. I didn't even realize, but anytime I danced, it was making my body expansive when anxiety tends to constrict and confine the body. So that's not new science. There's a lot of research that backs that up, but having experienced it myself, that's where I'm so passionate. I just want people to understand not just the mind-body connection, but how the way we move influences how we think. And that changing mindset alone is bullshit. Like, it's just not enough.
Right. You can't fix your thoughts with your thoughts. That's not how things work.
Totally. I say we have to feel our way in to think our way out. And the problem is when we are in these places of vulnerability and survival, we can't think to go into the body. And if we're not conditioned to go into the body, then we just stay stuck. So I tell my clients all the time, you have to practice this stuff before you're in crisis. And that's a real shift. It's a real paradigm shift because it's like, I'm not used to being in my body. So how do I practice it? It has to be very intentional, but it makes all the difference. And it doesn't take a very long period of time to make that shift happen.
Yeah. The other day I was in this therapy session. I was the client. I was with my therapist, and I just said to her, I was like, there's just a sensation in my chest and I'm trapped in it. Like I cannot escape it. I'm doing deep breathing. I'm meditating, blah, 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 doing all the shit that, clinicians tell you to do. And it wouldn't budge. And she said, do you feel like you need to move your body to allow it to move through you on a cellular level? And I was like, it was the first time anyone ever asked me that question. And I was like, yeah, it kind of does feel like I just need to roll. And I literally on my bed, like a child, was rolling back and forth and just like doing this on the sheets, and the feeling went away. The feeling just disappeared. But I never understood that sometimes you just need movement to release. I don't know. Maybe I'm sounding like an idiot, but it just didn't click until this therapy session.
You don't sound like an idiot.
No, I don't think you're an idiot at all. I think that you're conditioned, right? Like we are all conditioned to override, or not even to think about it. So, interestingly enough, as a dance movement therapist, in order to practice, most dance therapists, in order to practice where they are, have to be licensed in psychotherapy or a profession that licenses or recognizes psychotherapy. I don't have a license as a dance therapist, but I was able to get licensed as a counselor. And when I went to go sit for that licensure, I remember people telling me, other dance therapists or somatic practitioners, creative arts therapists, etc., said, forget everything you learned as a movement therapist. That won't help you pass this test. And it was really difficult, but I had to think. I had to just be in my headspace. Every answer that I gave, my first instinct was, how would I? Oh, wait, nope, that's not right. It was so counter to what I had been taught as a clinician. And I remember one question actually pointed to dance movement therapy as an answer. And I felt like I was doing pretty well on the examination. So I just kind of took a chance. And I remember the big red coming up saying, not indicated.
Wow.
And I was like, yes, it is. I do this every day, right? So it's how we're taught, even as clinicians. Now we are starting to see more somatics, specifically, with trauma. But I think it's my hope that in the very near future, all counseling, all social work, all mental health fields have at the very least some somatic training or some nervous system regulation basics, because what you experienced is going to continue to come up. And it's really powerful when a therapist can say, do you think that what you need to do with that is nonverbal? Because most of us will just stick to the verbal stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what this clinician did for me. She was like, do you feel like you need to move your body in order to release this? I feel like that's what you're getting at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, there's a difference between moving the body and moving with somebody. So I think that's, where dance movement therapy in particular comes in, because as therapists, we're trained not only to include the body in things and ask those questions and kind of make it the central focus of the session, but I also have learned to use my body as the catalyst for what happens in therapy. So much like you would, ask, how does that make you feel? Or what I hear you saying is, I can reference my body, and I can move with the client. I can move in response to my client. I can just simply notice, I'm feeling a tightness in my chest. Is it just me? Or are you feeling that too? Because we have something called kinesthetic empathy, right? Or somatic countertransference. So we can actually feel things that are happening in the therapy session. And yeah, sometimes I can bring it up and they look at me like, no, that's just you. So then, that's good information for me, because I can say, all right, there's obviously something I'm working through in here. I'll take that with me outside of the session and I'll work with my own therapist. But sometimes, more often than not, it is something the client is experiencing. And until I have had the opportunity to witness that for them or to validate that for them, it's been a part that they've been ignoring, or didn't even know to pay attention to. So it's a real game changer for a lot of people.
That's a really important point. Like, I don't think we're taught about body wisdom, like we're not taught about like what's coming up for you and where do you feel it and how is it feeling and all of those really important questions that I know for me, right? I'm not trained as a movement therapist, but that's so much about the work that I do, is because I pick up on so many different things. And then I like reflect it to my clients and they're like, yeah, what is that? Like even little kids, I have a family that I work with, and one of the littlest kids, like, I'm like, I have like this weird feeling in my stomach. How do you feel? And she's like, I do too. And I'm like, yeah. What should we do with that?
That's so cool.
It is cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it makes us more well-rounded clinicians. So, I've gotten to the point where I used to be very kind of jumped on the bandwagon with some of my other colleagues. I used to feel very territorial about the field, and really, had not just pride, but like ego in the work. And now I'm at the point where like there's enough work for all of us. And there are so many amazing clinicians that are bringing in somatics. It's not proprietary, I think what can be really helpful is sometimes people really do resonate with the word dance. And not that most of my clients would identify themselves as dancers, but having dance gives them permission to move as opposed to relying on words, or, they feel just almost like a different dynamic, because maybe words aren't my forte, or I don't want to retell a story that's very traumatizing. But if I know that going into it, I get to focus on dance or movement, and that has a very positive connotation for me, then it gives me other options, So I think rather than, it's one way or the highway, it's like we all need to be embracing the nonverbal communication that comes into the room with us, because more often than not, especially when words stop, right? How many of us have sat with clients and there's just like, we can hear the clock ticking, and it's like, I've run out of questions. They run out of things to say. That's when we can go to the body. We can just know, hey, what do you notice? What are you feeling in your body right now? And that furthers the conversation.
I want to take a quick pause to talk about our sponsor, a company called BetterHelp. It's an online therapy platform where all the therapists are licensed and accredited professionals. It's affordable. You pay a low flat fee for therapy with your therapist, and it's convenient. Do it at your own time and at your own pace. and you can communicate with your therapist as much as you want and whenever you feel is needed. And more importantly, it's effective. Thousands of people have benefited from therapy using BetterHelp, and we're really grateful to offer all of our listeners 10% off your first month. So if you're interested in receiving therapy ASAP, click the link in our show notes and you can get started. And you get to save money. People are listening to this episode, they probably don't even know where to start. Like they don't even know how to connect to the body or how to use dance or movement to heal or work through the hard things in their lives. What's a set of questions, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here, that one could ask themselves in a moment where they would incorporate your specialty?
Again, this is not specific to dance movement therapy. This was not even a question that came up when I was studying, but in an attempt to make what I do more accessible and digestible to people, the question that I love to start with is, how am I moving? How am I moving right now? Or how am I moving today? And then more often than not, it starts with some form of exercise, right? Someone might say, I'm not moving right now, but I ran this morning, or I just came from yoga. I'm going to go take a dance class later. And then we can further inquire, right? Well, how are you moving right now in this moment? And usually you get kind of a blank stare. And sometimes it's like, I'm sitting on the, okay, you're sitting, right? How are you sitting? And so then we start to cue, what is my posture? How am I gesturing? How am I breathing? You know, these movements that we take for granted because it's not really something we think about unless it's no longer at our disposal. So I find just asking myself, even, how am I moving right now? If you are first noticing really extreme emotion, that's a great segue, right? I'm so frustrated right now. How am I moving? Because when we can identify how that emotion is embodied, we can change the positioning of the body and ultimately allow that emotion to move through it.
I could have used you like 30 minutes ago. I was so rigid. Now I'm reflecting, right? Like I was so fucking rigid, and I was leaving my house to come to my parents' house because my Wi-Fi wasn't working. And I locked the door when I was trying to get into the car. And it was just like, oh, it was like, fuck shit. And I was like, it was so intense. And I just felt I felt like a piece of marble, just could not. And then of course I don't know what happened, but I started crying, and then I got softer, and I was like, oh, you're just frustrated, like little baby. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, tears of frustration, right? Tears of just emotional intensity. And, I think that's a beautiful example of just naturally, whether you realize it or not, letting your body move through that emotion. How many of us just stuff it, or push it down of oh no, not today. I am not going to cry now, and we just keep going.
Oh, bitch, I cry.
So many people don't give themselves permission to do that, or they've overridden that mechanism so many times, right? That it's hard to cry, or we just can't access it. So it's not necessarily one way, it's obviously in relationship dance therapy will look different with every client, but I appreciate the question because I think there is so much we can be doing for ourselves if we just remind ourselves that we are not just a head, but we are also a body. And that as overwhelming as that can be to realize, it's also such an immense support system that we can use our body to help us manage really intense emotions.
When I was going through a breakup last summer, a very significant relationship, I called myself the Glen Crow crier because I walked about 5 to 7 miles a day, and I would just cry. I would stop. I would cry. I would go to hometown. I'd get an iced tea. I'd cry. I'd walk, cry. And I was just hyper processing everything. And my body was asking me to move through it that way. But I didn't give a fuck. I would just cry. Sorry, freaks people out, but it just is what it is. I don't want to stuff, because the people that we know who stuff, right? Our clients stuff for years and years and years, and it comes out in these maladaptive behaviors. And then they're with us at 50 years old. Why the fuck can't I stop drinking? Why the fuck can't I stay in my marriage? Why can't I blah, 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 right? And it's all this stuff that's just been shoved into different parts of our bodies that we're not or haven't learned how to express.
I found myself kind of doing the same thing when COVID hit. I was home with 2 young kids, and, while my house felt safe, in some ways, obviously, there were other times where it felt so suffocating and so restricting and stifling. And I remember those times I would just walk out the front door. I mean, my kids were safe, they were with someone, but I would just walk out the front door and I would just take off, and I would just walk and walk until the tears came. And I would just, probably the same thing, except I was walking around the streets of Deerfield.
Right. Deerfield crier.
And yeah, I would just cry until they just kind of stopped, and I kind of came back to myself, and then would literally find my way back home, and I don't know. Sometimes my family was just like, "Oh, how was your walk?" It didn't need explanation, right? I didn't need to be like, "Oh, mommy's going for an exercise right now." It was literally just this emotional, if I don't leave and let this out right now, that was just for me what I had to do. Just needed to kind of walk and just let it come. Because again, the constriction and kind of the confinement wasn't really allowing for that to happen in some moments in our, in our house. So
I just had a thought that feels like I'm on mushrooms right now. Crying is the tear ducts movement.
I love that. Can we quote that?
No, we're talking about movement, and then crying just came up, and I'm like, holy shit, that's literally the tear ducts flowing through movement and releasing.
The moon is a pupil into our universe from a different universe.
Dude, life is so fucking trippy, man.
This is all so weird, brother.
But doesn't that kind of make sense, though?
It does. It does.
To me, somebody with brain damage from drug addiction, hell yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
But I think that for me, that's why it's so important to see the movement in everything, right? Because if it's just it's exercise, it's running, it's walking, it's stretching, it's meditating, we'll never see the movement that's already happening. Which, yeah, how many clients come into our offices crying? Oh, but I'm not moving. I'm like, you're moved to tears. That is moving, right? There's a reason we talk about moved to sadness, moved to laughter. I mean, it's an emotion moving through you. And yeah, the release of tears. I mean, it is movement. It's movement.
Yeah. You know what we should coin? Crying is the tear ducts twerking.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
I'm not crying. My tear ducts are twerking.
I love it.
That's good merch.
Yes.
Okay. So, I have to, because I loved the first question. Give us, we're segueing into tangible tools where our listeners can start asking themselves these movement-based questions. What's 3 more questions that listeners could ask themselves if they want to incorporate this modality?
Yeah. So how am I moving is a big one. I put together kind of this little body awareness for mental health journal. It's really just 3 prompts, but since you're asking for questions, I think these can be helpful. So, the question I like to ask is kind of around awareness, right? So similar to how am I moving, you can just bring awareness, what am I aware of in my body at this moment? So I give an example of tight shoulders, right? The next question you can ask is, how does this impact my mental health, right? So what am I aware of in my body? How does this impact my mental health? So for me, when my shoulders are tight, I recognize that either I'm already stressed or I'm on the verge. I'm about to be really stressed and overwhelmed because that's just where I hold my tension. So I've made the connection of tension in my shoulders equals frustration, irritation, stress. And then the third question we can ask is, what is something I can do in this moment to meet this frustration or this emotion, right? What can I do? How can I move my body? How can I listen to it in this moment to help support my mental health? So for me, that would be, maybe rolling my shoulders, That might be, getting a device, one of those like
Theragun.
Theragun things. Yeah.
Sponsor us. I love you, Theragun.
Right. Just hand, family member, friend, a massage, something so that I can address it in the moment. So what am I feeling in my body? How does this impact my mental health? And what can I do to respond to it right now?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about a specific emotion and see if there's I'm sure there's not ever just like a consistent response, but I've been curious about it because it's something I've been experiencing and maybe some of our viewers or listeners have too. So one of the things that I've noticed in my own life in this last year is like intense loneliness, like I just experience it so deeply. And somebody in my life was like, you can scratch your own arm, you can put a pillow behind your back and it feels like somebody's behind you. But it's like when you work with people who are dealing with loneliness, like, is there like a common symptom in the body that you see or something that you can like pinpoint?
That's a really interesting question because just this week, I've had 2 clients that brought up loneliness and isolation, which they're not new, right? Like I think we've all experienced that in some way. Certainly through the pandemic, we heard isolation a lot. We needed to isolate, right? But I'm like thinking for a moment. I don't know if it's so much how it shows up, but the common way of getting through it or moving through it.
Yeah, give me the antidote.
I don't want to say the same. Yeah, the antidote. There you go. But I'm thinking now, like, how does it show up? I mean, I guess there is a common theme of, I would say constriction. I would say it's pretty rare if we're feeling lonely or isolated that we're taking up a lot of space.
Right. I go into a ball.
Yeah. Actually, that's something that came up this week as well. So my client, she's an older woman. So she was like, I can't do it, but imagine that I'm in a ball on the floor.
Yeah.
I was like, great, I'm there. So, it could be a proverbial ball, right? A mental, like I feel like I'm huddled in the corner, even though physically I'm standing upright. So, and like your mind's eye, right? Like what is your posture? So yeah, I tend to see it as isolating parts of our body, and that means sometimes cutting off parts of our body. Maybe I'm only focused on my upper body or my posture feels very confined or rigid, closed in. Again, because typically taking up space, being open doesn't coincide with isolation. So I think that's why sometimes we get that saying of, you can still feel lonely even if you're in a room full of people.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily the environment. It's your own environment, right? Like, what are you experiencing inside that creates the loneliness? It's not how many people we're surrounded by. So the antidote, again, taken with a grain of salt, because it's a little different for everybody, but is finding an organic way to take up space in your body, not just in your environment. It's not just power pose or, reach out your arms, but how do I move from inside to organically allow myself to take up more space, right? That might be feeling a fuller breath.
Yeah.
Because in a sense, you are connecting. That's the antidote to isolation, is connection. And that really starts with connecting to the self. There are movements we can do kind of in our vertical, right? Isolating our spine, kind of cow stretch, opening and closing of the shoulders, and that allows us to expand. So then there's kind of this outreach to the side. There might be just a perspective shift, moving our head, around the room. It's all how we move in space. But if we're walking through life feeling lonely and isolated, we're not even engaging in some of these planes and dimensions of movement. So again, we just stay stuck in this one place, never really challenging it. We try to get out of our head, gosh, I just need to connect. Oh, I'll call this person. But the motivation isn't there, right? Or it just doesn't feel the same. Or sometimes I'll feel like, well, they should reach out to me. I don't want to reach out to them. And that doesn't happen because they don't know that someone might not know our expectations. So, does that feel, how does that feel for you? Did I answer some of that question?
Oh, that's great. Like I think of, like when you were talking, I was like, I feel like a head and a torso. That's all I feel like when I'm lonely. I just feel like my head is just talking and then my torso is existing. But if I just took time to like get into my arms, get into my legs, get into my seat, like all of that, I think I could be way more expansive. And I think it would definitely help me to move through the emotion rather than stay stuck. Cause that, I think, and I know we have to wrap up. I think one of the things that I notice with my clients, my friends, this just goes beyond therapy, right? Like, we get cues from people all the time, whether we know them or not. And there's a real intense resistance to getting out of the feeling. A lot of people want in some way or another to stay stuck. And whether it's because they don't know that they can be released of it or because they think it's going to take too much effort, whatever it is, right? But like, there's just so much opportunity in these small little and these tangible tools, right? That like actually offer relief from these really painful feelings, and just allow you to access more life, right? Yeah.
It's like, so you want me to do all this stuff with the one tool that I have? I'm not sure I can do that. But it goes back to like when we really incorporate the body, we unlock the fact that there's a whole toolbox already there. And it's not so much about how we use it. It's just that we use it. Just, not to dwell, but since you brought up that beautiful example, I really appreciate how you said, I just noticed that I'm a head and I'm a torso. And so if I'm not aware or bringing in movement, literally, if I'm not aware, even metaphorically speaking, of my feet, how will I move? I can't carry myself, right? Unless someone is literally carrying me or wheeling me, which that happens, right? When we feel so immobile, we expect people to carry us, right? Or I feel depleted or victim, like I need help, right? Move me, someone take me out of this.
Whoa.
Just that like, wow, I can wiggle my fingers and then that migrates. And maybe now I'm moving my wrists. And once we're aware of our arms, we can literally reach out. We can pick up the phone and give a call. Yeah, right. Wiggle our fingers, move our arms. But that example that you gave, I was like, oh man, that would be a really powerful session of just recognizing, when I come into my body and I know what's not moving or what I'm not connecting to, that immediately gives me options of what I can do with the parts once I accept that they're there.
Fuck, this is good.
No, thanks for bringing in your example and being so, transparent. I really appreciate that about this platform.
I will always be the Glencoe crier.
Well, I will walk with you. And now that we're neighbors, I love Hometown. I love that place. I just went to the one in Lake Forest today.
It's so nice.
They should sponsor this too.
They love me. They love me.
Erica, thank you so much for bringing in such a unique perspective. I think an easily missed perspective, right? Because we get so cerebral and intellectual and we forget that we have this vessel that carries so many answers. And so thank you for joining us. We'll put all of Erica's social media information and website so that people can look into this modality and have more access to this powerful information. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thanks so much, Erica. And to honor this episode, please always allow your tear ducts to twerk. We love that. And we love you. The biggest love. Big, big love.